Welcome back to the Open Up podcast, everyone, to episode 69 with Danielle Kettlewell, Olympian and author. And if I'm not mistaken, you've got your first book coming out pretty soon, titled The Unlikely Olympian. Give us the rundown.
Well, okay, first of all, I'm episode 69, and that made me laugh a little bit. Sorry for being inappropriate.
Me too, when I wrote it down.
That's really funny. Yes, gonna take that as a win. But I actually haven't officially announced it yet. So you are my first kind of platform for doing that. But I have been working on a book for the past few years since I went to the Olympic Games in 2016 to share my journey to the Olympic Games, because it was unlikely, as is in the title. And I think with most people, it was amazing to do it for myself, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. But what feels so much better is using what I had learned to have a greater sense of contribution in the world. And it was a ridiculously insane opportunity that happened in my life, and I believe it was given to me for a reason, to share with others and inspire other people to go after their dreams, because we're kind of living in this magical time with so much available at our fingertips, with the internet and the fast-paced moving world, with so many things being automized and broken down, and jobs, that people, kind of like the shitty jobs that people didn't want to do, are disappearing. So it's giving us the time and the space for people to go after their dreams. And that's what I'm really passionate about sharing that at the moment. And that was all sparked through my own unlikely journey to the Olympics.
Yes, Queen. Love it.
Yeah. Love it.
First question, bit of a deep one, straight off the bat. How would you describe yourself, or the way that you view or perceive yourself, as a woman and or human?
That's really, it's interesting, because this is something that I'm constantly working on, is my own self-worth. And I think sometimes it's easy for other people can see me as an Olympian or a speaker or an author, which is crazy to say that now, but part of me, I still get that kind of imposter syndrome, like, who am I?
Wow, okay.
I think we all do. I think it's important for people to know that I have that feeling as well. But I believe I'm a passionate life enthusiast who is really empathetic and has a deep desire to make my own change in the world, in my environment. And I want to make waves in oceans that I can't see. I want to make a difference and uplift people and inspire people to live their greatest, most beautiful life, because I think that's going to uplift the entire consciousness of this planet. And as a woman, I hope that I believe that I am kind and compassionate and caring and motivational and inspiring. And I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an auntie to 14 nieces and nephews, and I'm a good friend, and I am a synchronized swimmer on top of all that.
Holy shit. That was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Have you practiced that much?
No, I actually haven't. That was the first time.
You're so
I should have
good.
said, oh no, I practice that all the time.
So articulate. It's amazing.
Thank you.
So usually the format, like we spoke about beforehand, is going through your story of struggle, how you overcome it, and then any lessons you've learned along the way. Before that, I guess, if you could you give us a breakdown or a summary of your childhood up until that point where you're going to share that story?
Yeah, definitely. So as I have told, people can hear that I have an accent. I think that everyone else here has an accent, but being in Australia, I'm told that I have an accent, and I'm originally born in Vancouver, Canada. And I was born to the youngest of 5 children, and I have 4 older siblings, and they're all in their teenage years when I was born. So I was kind of at this weird point where I grew up kind of as an only child, but amongst 5, because by the time that I was, moving through my younger years, all of my siblings had moved out. And at 4 years old, I actually became an auntie,
nice.
Which is, yeah. I really wanted my niece to be my younger sister, and I couldn't understand why she couldn't be my sister. But anyways, figured it out when I got older. And I think, as everyone does, I believe that everyone has limiting self-beliefs, and that's just the basis of us as human beings, because in our kind of egocentric childhood minds, you know, in the first 7 years of our life, we kind of take the circumstances of life a little bit too seriously, and they build up limiting self-beliefs. And I believe that everyone has three, all of us have three main ones. You know, mine is I am not enough. Other people's maybe I'm not worthy or I'm not capable. So I kind of grew up with that I am not enough. And I wanted to really point out that those limiting self-beliefs that I had are not blaming anyone else. I had a beautiful childhood, and I'm really lucky that I have two loving parents and I have four older siblings, and I'm really grateful for the way that I brought up. But that was my thing, and I struggled through that I am not enough. I used something to feed that. And I literally fed my limiting self-belief. So I used to use food a lot as a vice, because I just felt like I wasn't good enough. So that was a pain that I had inside of me, and I tried to stuff it down with eating. And ironically, you know, it never works, as all of our vices are. And I think, you know, mine was food, other people's maybe alcohol or drugs or sex or gambling or whatever. But it's really just something that covers the pain on the surface level. And I was put into, amongst all this, I was put into a sport of synchronized swimming, which I fell in love with. But I had this limiting self-belief of not being enough, and which led me to overeating, which led me to being a kind of an overweight child. But I was in a sport where I had to spend all my time in a bathing suit. So it was kind of this weird combination, and really massive blessing at the end of the day.
Were you ever self-conscious being a little bit overweight?
Oh my gosh, I was so self-conscious, and I think looking back, I wasn't overly obese or anything like that. And I believe everyone's bodies are different, everyone's bodies are beautiful. But I think what I look back and it's hard for me to see is more the pain that I felt and the hatred that I felt within myself when I was at that stage. And I was very self-conscious in my sport, but I fell in love with it, because synchronized swimming is this kind of weird sport that can swimming and gymnastics, and need the acrobatic ability of like a diver, but their aerobic capacity of, you know, a free diver, and you need to push your body to the limits and do all of that to the music while holding your breath for 50% of the time. And it just dazzled me. And the more I got into the sport, the more I fell in love with it. But because I had that limiting self-belief of not being enough, I just truly believed I was never going to go anywhere with it, you know? So I just thought, I'm just going to keep doing it because I love it. And that's just going to have to be it for me. And I think it's important to remember that despite everything that I have done since then, the core of it all comes back to the fact that I loved my sport, and I've always done it because I've loved it. And the great opportunities that have come from there is because I'm going after something that I'm passionate about. But to kind of bring it all in, I continued through my high school years struggling with my weight, struggling with my self-confidence, and I was never really a good synchronized swimmer. I was kind of the bottom of the team. I was kind of that girl that just participated, but was, you know, never the shining star, never the, you know, most likely to be an Olympian. And so at 18 years old, I had kind of reached the pinnacle that I thought I could in Canada. I had gone to national championships there as a reserve. I was not even in the top 100 athletes. And I thought at that point, you either had to try out for the national team, which I was never going to make it in Canada, or retire, quote unquote, retire. So I retired, and I was in university, and that because I had taken away something that I was so passionate about in my life, it kind of led that limiting self-belief in me to grow and expand, and therefore I used my vice of eating food to make me feel better, which didn't make me feel better, and, you know, made me gain more weight, and therefore it kind of just became a cycle, right? Because you try and feed it, it doesn't make you feel better, so therefore it feels shittier, so then you keep trying to feed it, and whatever your thing is, and that's because I took away the passion in my life. So I kind of got back into synchro at a master's level, which is what most people, masters is like, I hope I don't offend anyone, it's like when old people do the sport. But like I was 18 or 19 at the time, and I was like back in master's level, and I started swimming again. And because I loved it. And when I was training one day, we were doing something called highlights. So highlights in synchronized swimming is when we build a human pyramid underwater, and we all anchor up to the surface, and then the acrobat on the top jumps up, does like a flip, and lands in the water. It's absolutely spectacular, and I highly recommend anyone YouTube it. It's really cool. And so we were practicing highlights one day when I was with my master's team, and my teammate was standing on my shoulders, and she went up, and she came straight down on my head. And at the time I was in university, I was working 2 jobs. I was studying full time, and I was training, and I had a midterm the next morning, and I thought all was fine. You know, at the time my teammates kind of pulled me out of the water, and I just brushed it off because, you know, I was told to be tough growing up, and I've always been pretty tough. But when I was driving home, I started to feel like a really massive pain behind my eye. I had a really bad headache and was starting to feel really nauseous, and I went home trying to study that evening, and the words on the page, I couldn't read them. It was English, but I didn't understand what it was. And I tried to speak to my mom, and words wouldn't come out of my mouth. And it was so confusing and overwhelming. And I went to the doctor the next day, and after sleeping a ridiculous amount, and, you know, the light was bothering me and everything, and I was told I had a concussion. And, you know, when you have a concussion, you pretty much have to do nothing. You're told to pretty much be a human vegetable. No TV, no computer, no stimulation, no lights, no reading, you know, no alcohol, no exercise. Pretty much just lay in your bed and rest, which is for someone like me who had trained all my life and had been really productive, and it was really hard, you know. And I think depression is a symptom of concussions. But I think as well, you know, when you're told to do nothing and lay in a dark room all day, that's going to lead to sadness within anyone. And I feel really grateful. I'm always really aware when I talk about this is I don't have depression because I know the seriousness of mental illness, but I definitely fell into a depressed state. Not because I was sad, but because I felt nothing. And it got to the point where we didn't know what to do to make my brain better, and nobody knew what to do because concussions are so hard. You can't get a CAT scan. You can't get really anything to help you improve. All you have to do is base your progress off the symptoms and rest. You know, there's no magic pill, there's no cast, and you're not bleeding. You know, you look like a normal human. So it was a really, really weird and bizarre time. And I just felt like everything had been taken away from me, and there was no answers. And I didn't know when the end of the road was going to be. And that was a really hard time. And looking back, honestly, I was wallowing in self-pity, and I wish that I had a little bit more of the perspective that I do have now, but I'm grateful for that, because if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be where I am today.
That's a whole lot of uncertainty. And I had a friend I lived with actually went through something similar. She had a brain injury and kept passing out and having epileptic fits, and she'd like urinate or shit herself, and she didn't have any answers either. And just watching her go through that for a couple of years was heartbreaking, because she was just so uncertain of what she could and couldn't do. She couldn't drive or anything, so really lost her independence and any like sort of scrap of certainty about what her life was going to contain.
Yeah, it's and your brain is so precious, and I think people don't really realize until you're in that situation, and we take advantage of it a lot. And just because it's something like it's an injury that you can't see, you know, because people look normal, a lot of people kind of don't think they don't give it the credit that it deserves. Because it is really serious, and I'm really grateful that my concussion wasn't as bad as many people that I have spoken with about. But I think something that I feel really passionate about speaking about is the pain that we all go through is equal within all of us. And I think living in a world where, you hear about horrible things happening to so many people, it's really easy to allow other people's pain to be more valuable than ours. But the thing is, we don't know how anyone else is feeling because we are only in our own body, and the pain of all of our lives is equal within all of us. So I know that I had a beautiful upbringing. I have two wonderful parents, but I experienced pain, and I can't compare my pain to anyone else's. And I think when we overvalue other people's pain and undervalue our own, that leads to us not working through it. So I think it's really important for people to acknowledge the pain that they are going through, whether that be like if your cat died, and you loved your cat, or if your grandma passed away, or if you were sexually abused, or if you lived through a genocide. Like, it all matters. And I think once we get to a point when we realize that in every human being, and we all need to work through our shit, we're all going to kind of work through that and come out the other side better human beings. Sure. So part of my struggle was my limiting self-belief of I am not enough, struggling with my weight, having my concussion, and amongst all this, I was kind of in this depressed state.
So before we go any further, buddy, a couple questions about your childhood. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you've done a lot of work on yourself. You've cultivated a lot of self-awareness, as you'd have to do as an Olympian, because mm-hmm. part of progress is looking at what you've done previously and bettering that. So with all the self-awareness you've cultivated since your childhood, looking back now, do you have an understanding of why you felt like you weren't enough growing up?
I think that I think it was little things just along the way, and our limiting self-beliefs, I believe, are passed down from our parents, and built up, within the first 7 years in our life, because our brain is in a really vulnerable state of taking on the patterns of the situations around us. And I don't know personally enough about this, but if you listen to Dr. Lipton, Biology of Belief, he knows a lot about the brainwave state of children within those first 7 years, and changing those genetic patterns. But my mom struggled a lot with her body image, and she's a tiny, beautiful little human being who has nothing to worry about. And I know that passed down onto me, and that was part of my thing. And I think just being, the youngest of 5 children, in the sense that I kind of grew up by myself, whereas all my siblings were going and living their lives and doing their own things and getting married and having children. So, I was just the one at the end that I was given so much love, but I had this feeling that I was forgotten. And I'm not saying that I was, but that's how I interpreted it. And I think I feel really, it's always like a line that you want to tread, because you don't want to offend anyone, like I love my parents and I love my siblings, but that's how I interpreted it. And was it right? Not necessarily, but that's how I took it. And I think that just cycled with my own self-confidence, passed down from my mom, and my body image struggles. It just kind of makes this little cocktail that you continue to feed of you not feeling enough and yada, yada. And then you have your own, limiting self-beliefs and your own shit that you have to work through. And that was part of my shit, really.
So if you had siblings who are all older, did you feel like you ever fit in that environment?
I definitely felt that I didn't fit in. Like, I don't think that I knew my place. My parents were getting older and, wanting to get to a place where they could retire. I was born when my mom was 43. So, my parents have worked really hard their whole life, and they kind of wanted to enjoy that. So growing up, they left me a lot, and went and traveled, and I stayed with my siblings, and I think that taught me so much independence, but it probably left me a little bit feeling like, oh, well, my parents kind of abandoned me, and they didn't. But that's, I think, how I interpreted it, and left me feeling a little bit out of place. Like, where do I fit in? I'm in this weird spot where I don't relate to my siblings, and my parents are a lot older than me, and much older than the average parents, and they are wanting to live their life. So where is my spot? And yeah, I think that's something that I had to work through. This is like therapy session. Love it.
Sorry, Are you comfortable walking us through your story from where we finished off on?
So I was amidst my concussion, and I actually had my 21st birthday, which was much different than I expected it to be. And the day after, I was Skyping a friend of mine who was helping me through everything. And ironically, both of us, so what I forgot to mention is both my parents are Aussie, and they moved to Canada back in the 70s. And so I have had the right to dual citizenship. So my friend that I was Skyping, she also has an Aussie parent, and she was also a synchronized swimmer, a friend of mine. So when we were talking and she was kind of wishing me happy birthday, we were just going through everything, she got a message from the assistant national team coach of the Australian synchronized swimming team, who was reaching out to her. And synchro is a really small world. So this coach had used to work in Canada, and she knew my friend. And she said that, I know that you had dual citizenship, and Australia is looking to have get more athletes on the team because that we don't really have a massive pool of athletes at the moment, and we want to make a really strong team to qualify for the Olympic Games in Rio. And at the time, the opportunity was just presented to her. And I was sitting there and I was so excited for her because, I had the belief that I'm not good enough for anything. So I was so stoked for her, and I couldn't believe this. And I was like, in my concussed state, kind of like jumping up and down. And then she had this moment and she said, "Oh, Danielle, you could do it too." And initially, I was just like, laughed because I'm like, okay, you're joking. Like, surely, like, here I am concussed, like in Canada, never really thought that I was that good at synchronized swimming. Like, and and you want me to go and try out for the Australian team. Like, you got to be joking me. But I kind of let that thought ruminate in my mind. And so many things came up that, challenged me, and you're like, there's no way you couldn't make it happen. Like, it's too difficult. And then I just thought, what if I tried? What if I just went for it? This is an opportunity that doesn't come around twice in a lifetime. I was imagining myself ahead in 2016. It was at this time, is end of 2013. I was imagining myself watching the Olympic Games as a spectator on TV, and I was thinking I would rather know that I had tried and failed than always wondered what if. And I think a lot of people in this lifetime are faced with opportunities. Not everyone's is going to be as crazy as mine was, but we're faced with little opportunities along the way. And initially, we all face fear, because fear is our natural state of the world trying to protect us, our ego trying to protect us from getting hurt, right? Because, it's freaking scary to be vulnerable, and it's freaking scary to put yourself out there. And I thought, well, what's scarier? Putting myself out there and giving it everything I have and failing, or not even trying because I was too scared? And I think that so many people are faced with that opportunity sometimes, and a lot of people choose the latter, and because it's just too overwhelming. But I just had this tiny little belief or hope inside of me that, there's a 1% chance that this could be me. There's a 1% chance, less than that I could go to the Olympics. And what if I am the 1%? So at that point, I think that opportunity also gave me the motivation and belief and desire and fire under my butt to work on my concussion and get better, because I was in such a state of self-pity and self-wallowing that I didn't really have any motivation to do anything to help myself. Yeah. But that opportunity kind of helped me jump into high gear, and I was looking at for different people to help me recover. I was going to a chiropractor. I was talking to people who had been through it before, speaking with occupational therapists. And at the same time, I had to kind of start to integrate and get myself back into the water and start training, because from the day that we got that opportunity to 6 weeks later, at the beginning of January, me and my friend were flying to Perth for a training camp, an open call to try out for the Australian national team, which was just insane. I had never been to Perth before. Like, my Aussie family's from Sydney. I'm like, where is Perth? Like, what is this place? It's so far away from the rest of the world, which is still really far. And I got to that training camp and I honestly sucked. Like, I really wasn't that good. But I also saw the opportunity in front of me, and there was about 16 girls there at the time, and 8 make the team. And, I thought, as crazy as it is, and as much as I know that I suck at this moment, I know that I can work really hard, and I know I can put in the hard yards. And if my opportunity is eight out of 16, there's a 50% chance that I could get on that team. And if I'm willing to work and give it everything, there is a possibility that I can make this happen. So as crazy as everyone, probably thought that I was, within a few months of getting that call and going to that training camp in Perth, I had sorted out my Aussie citizenship. I had packed up all of my bags in Canada. I had recovered from my concussion, and I was moving to Perth, about 7 months later, and I knew nobody. I knew nothing about this place, and I was like all by myself, but I was so determined to make it all happen. And I think it's also really important to mention that 4 months after I got my initial concussion, I got another one at a training camp. Wow. And so, and I heard you talk about this before, and I completely resonate with this. And this is something that, the path to our dreams is not linear, and there will be setbacks, and there is always something that's going to push us back. But I think what's so important is understanding those setbacks are not failures, and there's only failures when you choose to not learn from them. And so the beauty of that second concussion that I got from another highlight was that I had learned how to have the right mindset and what to do properly to help me recover. I learned to take it really, really, really seriously, and make sure I had no screens around. I was going to see the doctor every single day, and I felt as well motivated, and to get better. And that really helped. And it wasn't a linear path, and it was a windy road, but within 7 months of that, getting that opportunity, I had moved to Perth, and I was kind of on my way to getting to the Olympic Games.
That's so cool. One question about that, buddy, is knowing that you've grown up with this feeling that you're not enough, and you're speaking about having this imposter syndrome even now, how did you, as someone in a depressed state, following in self-pity, allow yourself to, I guess, take on this opportunity? Because most people, if they felt they weren't good enough, they won't let themselves take it.
Yeah, that's, I think, grappling with that thought of regret and like, what will I regret more at the end of the day, at the end of my life, kind of like putting yourself in the thought of like my 80-year-old self or my 100-year-old self, however old you think you're going to live until, will I look back and regret that I wasn't brave enough? And when I'm faced with hard decisions, I usually do that, because I think as much as one of my greatest, I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. One of my greatest fears is not living my life to my greatest potential. And I think that is so many people's greatest fear as well. Yeah. But a lot of people allow that fear to eat them alive because their limiting self-belief overpowers them. And a way that I kind of stepped into that, which is something beautiful that I learned from my bizarre, crazy, beautiful sport, is just, if you're afraid, fake it till you make it. And because in synchro, we have to go out there and swim these routines where we're literally dying. We don't have enough oxygen pumping through our body to really be able to stay alive. And your lungs are screaming and telling your brain that there is no way that you can stay under for any longer because you are going to pass out. But the body is so much stronger than the mind. And so we have to come out of the water at every time that we surface and smile and pretend and fake it until we make it, pretend that we're doing okay. And that kind of thought process really has helped me in my life, because so many times where I feel like I don't have it in me, that I feel like I'm an imposter. I feel like, who am I to do this? I kind of step into that person who I believe would be confident enough, believe would have no fear, who I believe would have everything in her to go after that opportunity. And it's not from a place of being fake, because I think sometimes people have a bit of are uncomfortable around that saying, fake it till you make it. It's more about stepping into the person that you believe that you can be to be able to get there. Stepping into your higher self, your future self that does have the confidence. And the more and more that you do that, you actually can, change the neural pathways in your brain, because you are, it's your thoughts create your life. So pretending that I am confident enough, long enough, for enough time, I am going to slowly have a little bit more confidence to go after it. And it is going to be scary. It's always freaking scary, but it's just choosing and working towards overcoming that and having a positive mindset along the way.
It's crazy, just the fact that when you explain it like that, because obviously as an onlooker who doesn't really understand synchronized swimming, you just think people go underwater, okay, cool, but you don't realize, like, it's not until someone like you explains the sort of depths you have to go to in terms of fighting this innate bodily response to suck in and breathe air. That's a whole load of resilience that not many people are ever gonna, have the chance to even attempt to cultivate. So that's fucking powerful.
Thank you. I think a lot of people, that's why I feel really strongly about speaking about, my sport amongst everything else, because it doesn't get the credit that it deserves. And your body is literally in a state of dying, and you have to fight off what it feels like to die, because where our heart rates are going at 180 beats per minute. And so that's like after Usain Bolt runs a 100-meter sprint, to go tell him to do another 100-meter sprint and holding his breath half the time. That's freaking hard, and growing up in that sport, despite my struggles and self-confidence, I was kind of conditioned with the mindset to push my brain past where my body thought it was possible. And so transitioning that thought process into life has really helped me go after so many things that seem terrifying, because I've switched over into that, that mindset within my life. And that's not to say that it's not hard. It's hard every time. Like, I was training this morning for 3.5 hours or something like that. And it was still hard. And I had been swimming for 18 years, but just choosing to overcome that, choosing to push my mind past the limits of where I believe that it can go, and push my body past that every single day. It's uncomfortable, but it's worth it,
And that's why you're going to be good at motivational speaking.
Thank you.
This is a selfish question. In terms of you being underwater and having this need to breathe and the possibility of passing out while you're underwater, have you had to face the fear of death?
Yeah. I think that my greatest, like, the way that I would least want to die is drowning, because I know exactly what it feels like. I have, I think, and I don't want to give a bad name to synchro, because it is safe, and there's always people watching, but there are people that pass out underwater sometimes, and our teammates pull us up out of the water. But, there is so many times when I've been training and I'm just like, I just don't know if I'm going to make it to the other side, and facing that fear over and over and over again. And especially, when your body is exhausted and you have to not only go and face the fear of death, but also do it with 100% confidence and do it to your best of your ability while smiling, is really freaking hard. Those smiles are not always genuine. They are fake. But at the same time, like, what I love about it all is because I'm out there and I am smiling, and we don't always smile. We do different facial expressions, but a little tiny bit of me thinks that I'm enjoying it, because a smile as a person makes me think that I'm happy, right? So I'm out there, and as much as I'm dying and I am smiling, a small part of my brain is like, oh, well, maybe she is enjoying this. And that, again, that's changing those neural pathways and faking it till you make it, and believing that you can achieve what you want to achieve through, changing your physical state and changing your mental state.
That's insane. I love that.
Thank you.
Definitely need to figure out some way to pit a synchronized swimmer against a Navy SEAL and someone doing Wim Hof.
Yes, I was actually, what's that guy, David Goggins?
Yeah.
Do you know David Goggins? I was like, I should challenge him. But then I had this fear. I was like, what if he's better than me? Because like he's David Goggins and he ran like 80 kilometers with a broken foot, you know, like I just don't. He could be. Anyways, but
It's
that
a
would be
crazy
really
man.
cool. Oh, he's insane. He is so insane. And like with Wim Hof, I'd be like, that would be a who am I state? Like, who am I amongst these amazing people? But yeah, that would be very cool.
All right. You can keep walking us through your story from there, buddy.
Cool. So I had moved to Australia. So we're in amidst like 2014 at the moment, and I was since I put myself in the right environment, I was starting to improve. And I think on the path to our dreams, it's really important for us to remember the power of environment, because as much as I wanted to be on the Australian national synchronized swimming team, I couldn't have done it if I was in Canada, right? Like it just wasn't possible. And our team wasn't centralized, so that means that we there was people from Queensland and Victoria and from Perth, and we would come together 2 weeks or a week out of every few months and for a training camp, and then we go and train in our separate states. And that's a lot of that comes down to funding, because we didn't really have the funds as the governing body, and the Australian government doesn't really give synchro any money. So we would have to be working in our spare time. You know, some days I would have to work until like 1 a.m. in the bar. I was working as a bartender. I'd walk home because I didn't have a car. I'd go to sleep for about 4 hours, and then I would run to training, because took me less time. I could get more sleep in if I ran to training than if I walked to training. And I'd have training that started at 5:30 in the morning, and I'd do that for 4 hours. And then, you know, and so once I got to Australia, like it wasn't easy. It was really hard. And I think that I was in the right environment, in the right place, but it still took a lot of determination and just taking one step at a time, because there were so many roadblocks and hurdles and setbacks, and it was not linear along the way, you know, having to financially find a way to make it all possible, because you know, to be an athlete on the Australian synchronized swimming team, sometimes you have to pay thousands of dollars a year to be able to be on the national team. And a lot of people don't actually know that. And there's a lot of, you know, there's the big high playing top athletes in Australia that get a lot of endorsements, and being an athlete is their full-time job. But a lot of the athletes that you see at the Olympic Games are self-funded or only partially funded, or they're working, or their families are helping them. And I think it's really important for people to know that just because you go to the Olympics doesn't mean you're rich and famous. You know, people do it for the honor and the pride of going after their country, and I regret nothing, despite all the amount of money that, you know, we had to find and spend on it. But it's not a smooth ride for most people, and they're actually working really hard at the moment to get more money for Australian athletes to be able to support themselves in the lead up to Olympic Games. So I hope that changes for the future of my sport and a lot of the sports around Australia. I've gone on a tangent. I've just realized.
No, that's intense.
Yeah.
I just want to know, considering the amount of stress you were under, both like physically and financially, obviously having to support yourself in a new country where you had no support network, and then obviously getting little sleep and working yourself really hard through training. As someone who's felt like an imposter or felt like they weren't good enough, how did you keep yourself, I guess, on task, and how did you keep that belief that you could keep going and persevere?
Yeah, I think it can get really overwhelming, and there was, you know, a positive attitude, honestly, like really helped me through all of that, and reminding myself that I was going after something that I was passionate about. Like I said, I did my sport because I loved it, and at the end of the day, despite all the hours in the pool, despite all the exhaustion, I really did enjoy it, and I enjoyed the process. But you know, there was some days where I would come home to my partner at the time, and like I remember just bursting into tears because I was so exhausted. Like I was exhausted from fighting so hard at training every day, fighting financially to make it possible, you know, being so far away from my family and being homesick and just pushing through all of that adversity got exhausting, and in the moment, I think we're all allowed to have those moments, that's part of human nature. And I think it's really important to feel that because, our emotions need to be felt through to be able to work through them, and just letting myself be in that feeling state of like, yeah, this is hard and I love it, but it still sucks right now. And I'm going to let myself feel it. And then tomorrow I'm going to wake up and we're going to work towards a solution. And amongst all that, I got too focused on the big picture. I think that's why I got into that state, because at that point I had a year and a half left until the Olympic Games or the tryout for the Olympic team. And I just thought, how am I going to do this for another year and a half? And I think sometimes when we think really big picture, it can be so overwhelming, because a lot of people have big goals, or they want to work to something that's so crazy that they just don't know how they're going to get there. But what I kind of reminded myself of is yes, I can keep those Olympic rings at the light at the end of the tunnel, but I just need to focus on tomorrow, the next week, the next month. What is my next step to get towards that long-term goal? Because I think we need to be short-sighted with a long-term vision when we're going after something, especially working through that struggle, because it can become so overwhelming. And so breaking down the steps and realizing that, okay, I would I would journal every single day. I would write down my goals. I'd write down what I need to do for that week, that training session, that week, that month, and so on and so forth. And breaking it down into little steps is so much more digestible, as opposed to kind of just trying to reach for something that's so far away and just aimlessly running towards it. And it can be really stressful. So just bringing back to that kind of a present mindset of presence in the moment and in the next week and in the next step really helped me overcome that overwhelming feeling and the days when it was really hard.
That's awesome. And I think Nick Saban, coach of Alabama Tide, who've won the most NCAA championships in football over in the US, he talks about focusing on the process rather than the prize as well, because if you're always focusing on the prize, then you forget to appreciate all the little things you've done along the way.
Yeah.
And then once you get there, you don't really have a good understanding of how you got there, and you're not grateful for what you've done in the process. And focusing on the prize as well. There's always going to be this distance between you and that end goal. So breaking it down into chunks like you do with journaling is super important.
Yeah, that was really integral for me to learn. And you're basically feeding into me in my next part of my story. So I'm glad we're on the same wavelength. But we ended up, the way that it works in the world for synchronized swimming is there's five Olympic rings, 5 Olympic continents. So North and South America, Europe, Asia, Australia, and Africa. And so to get the team to the Olympic Games, you have to qualify your spot for your continent. And Australia is quite lucky geographically because we don't have as much competition as people places in Europe. Yeah. So that was another part that I was really grateful that opportunity was a lot more streamlined for Australia. So we had to go to World Championships and beat New Zealand to be able to qualify for the games. And when we did that, that was one of the, proudest moments of my life. And to be able to do that collectively with my team felt so euphoric, because I think when you share that happiness collectively, it can feel so much brighter as opposed to just doing it yourself. And that led me to, the realization that we qualified the country for the Olympic Games, but we did not qualify ourselves individually. And a lot of people don't know that, you can qualify your Olympic spot for the country, but that doesn't, even though I swam in the team that qualified Australia, it doesn't mean that I was going to the Olympics. So I had to all of a sudden get into this really individualistic mindset of okay, I just need to focus on me, because from that World Championships to the Olympic team trials had about 8 months. And what do I need to do to get there? And, realizing that I need to work smarter rather than harder, because we're living in a world where a lot of people can work really hard. We're living in the hustle and grind, state right now. And people are overworked and overtired and all this stuff. So saying that you're going to work harder than others at this day and age is not necessarily, possible, because lots of people are working their ass off. But what could I do to work smarter? So that for me, that took a lot of self-reflection and figuring out what I was good and what I was bad at and what I needed to improve on it. And having an improvement mindset internally and externally. So realizing like, what are my personal strengths and weaknesses, and what can I amplify within myself to make myself better? So I need to be chosen for the team, and what can I work on within myself to be chosen for the team? And then realizing, there's on the path to whatever we're going after, there's always people that have done something similar before, and learning from their journey. And, bringing it back to kind of what you were saying is, right before my Olympic team trials, I kind of had this realization of, holy shit. I said that I would rather try and fail than always wonder what if. But I was, before the trials, I was faced with the possibility of quote unquote failure, despite everything that I had been through and giving up everything and sacrificing so much, that I had this kind of epiphany in that moment of before the trials, which was, holy shit, like I have already done it. Because me going after my dream was the process of getting there, and not actually the end goal. Like you said, not actually the prize. Because I think, when we're focused only on that end goal or on that prize, a lot of the time people can not appreciate the moment. And when we realize that going after the dream is existing in the dream and waiting in that and feeling it and being grateful in it, that is the true goal. And what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day is only the cherry on top. Like that's when I think we all get into a place of true magnificence, because it is about the process, and who I became and the person that I was, and the lessons that I learned and the people that I met was from the process of me going after it, and not by the goal at the end of the day. And which was really important for me to learn. And I think from a manifestation viewpoint, because I realized that and released myself from the end goal, but existed in so much gratitude, I actually ended up qualifying for the team and making it to the Olympic Games.
So sick. I think as well, when we're focusing on that prize, that end goal, we're focusing on what we're going to feel once we get there and once we achieve it. Whereas the beauty is really in having something throughout that process that gives you and your life so much purpose and so much meaning.
It's true. And then if you kind of live your life thinking that you're going to get happiness when you get to a certain point, or when you get to a certain income, or when you get to a certain job or weight or whatever, you're going to realize that you're going to be deeply unsatisfied when you get there if you haven't enjoyed the process of it. Because like, we don't live our life making a resume of the things that we've done to take with us to the grave, right? We live our life to enjoy it, to enjoy the every day and enjoy the every moment. And that takes, getting to that place of enjoyment comes from like realizing how lucky we all are, and working through our own shit and realizing and allowing our pain to come forward and working through that, but also being grateful for the everyday and every moment.
So sick. I love it.
I'm probably going to need to go take a nap after this.
I got a question to ask you about that part of your life when you were speaking about opening up to your partner. You go home and cry sometimes, and surrendering to allowing yourself to feel that throughout that process. I think most of us who haven't been at any advanced level within sports, we see elite athletes as like the Kobe Bryants, the Mamba mentality, or the Lance Armstrong who do anything to get where he wants to go. It's like these robots who must not have emotion.
Yeah.
How is that something you were brought up with, to feel that, or is that something you've learnt along the way, being comfortable feeling the emotion?
I think that came a lot from the fact that I'm not Kobe Bryant, I'm not Michael Phelps, I'm not Usain Bolt, I'm not one of those people that is like naturally gifted, I had to fight tooth and nail for where I have gotten to, and I am not the person that people would think that would be an Olympian. I am just an average Joe and or average Jane or whatever. And I think I want people to know that I'm a normal person who went after something incredible. And because I feel like I'm quote unquote normal, like I felt those emotions. I'm not a robot, and I don't ever want to be a robot. And I think I was lucky growing up that I was in I grew up, I went to a like all girls Catholic school. But that kind of really fostered a positive emotional environment where we were allowed to talk about our feelings. And unfortunately, I think to men, as a woman, I have a benefit that it's more socially acceptable to speak about my feelings. And I think that's something that I think is amazing that you are working on changing that, because we need to shift that culture in this country, in this world, that it's only okay for women to talk about their feelings, because that's not the case. Like, as human beings, we all feel emotions and they're all important and valid. So I kind of grew up being allowed to express myself. And I just realized, from a young age, the power of vulnerability and how important it is. And vulnerability allows growth, not only personal growth, but growth in like deeper connections with friends and deeper connections with family and deeper connections with the people around you. And I just, throughout my schooling, I was kind of allowed that and given that space and saw that. And it gave me the ability to be vulnerable at multiple points in my life. And I am not perfect by any chance. I still, I want to seem like the strong, empowering, motivational person, but I still have hard days, and I still sometimes struggle letting that emotion come out, because I want people to see me a certain way. And I think so many people struggle with that. They want their facade to the world to be seen a certain way. They want to be seen as strong. They want to be seen as, like nothing bothers them. And I want that too, but it's actually so much more powerful when we allow our vulnerability to come forward. I don't know if you watched Brene Brown on Netflix, which is
No, I haven't watched it yet.
You got to watch it, man. It's so good. But like, vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is courage. And I think that as a culture, we need to change that and shift that stigma, because it's going to lead to a much more awakened and empowered and inspiring and passionate society if we all allow ourselves to be vulnerable and the safe space to be vulnerable. And I think what I learned as well is when you open in a safe space, when you are vulnerable with someone, they cannot help but to show compassion and empathy back. With the right people. I think it's really important to choose the environment, but the right people are only going to show love and compassion and understanding back to you. And I hope that more people can understand that, and in places where time is hard and they are struggling, they find the right people to open up with and be vulnerable with, because they're going to be shown love in return. Because I think as human beings, it is innate in us. We are all love at our core, and we only want other people truly to feel that love. And so when you see that in someone else, you're only going to respond with love.
It's amazing. And I think the opposite of vulnerability really is repression of those desires and those emotions, which then turns into mental health issues like depression. Because you are having to wear a mask. You are having to be someone that you're not. Yeah, definitely. And going on my journey to the Olympics, I think, people were watching me on social media, and I wanted to present this facade that everything was, I was going after my dream and it was all awesome. And it was really easy for me to put up a front that I was going and doing these things and ticking these boxes and getting these accolades. But people didn't know, because I didn't share, that I was struggling. Like, I was struggling because it was a fucking hard journey. I was struggling because I was really homesick. I was struggling because that amount of stress put so much stress on my relationship that I was in at the time, because it something like that is only bound to like come out in the home space, and me and my partner at the time really struggled because there was so much pressure on the both of us. I was struggling because the friend that I had moved to Australia with, that I got that opportunity with, she had her own stuff that she wasn't dealing with, and she was projecting onto me. And she yelled at me one day, and was at the time my best friend in the entire world, and she yelled at me and said,
you're stealing my dream. I didn't know no one on this side of the entire world, and she was my only person for a while, and she was accusing me of taking something from her that I thought we could both go after. So, I was presenting this facade to the world that I was having an amazing time and going to world championships and being on the national team, but I was struggling in myself, I was struggling in my friendship, and I was struggling in my relationship, and I didn't talk about that. And that's something that I regret, but now, but I'm being a lot more active in knowing that the power of sharing about that and sharing about the ups times and the down times, because like I said, life is not linear. Life is a roller coaster, and is supposed to be. And how are you ever supposed to feel the pure joy and bliss of happiness if you haven't felt the true darkness of sadness? And I think we all feel that as humans, and we shouldn't hide that.
That's cool. One more thing I want to ask you about your story is, how do you view identity? Have you had to work through that at all, being someone who's gone to like nationals in Canada, now transitioning over to Australia and representing a whole different nation of people? Have you dealt with any issues with identity at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I really struggle with that for the first couple years that I was here, because I grew up in Canada, at heritage days and stuff. I would always be like, yeah, my family's Aussie, and I like come wearing those cork hats and like bring my Vegemite and cheese like toast, for people to try, and everyone's like, oh, that's gross. But I was really proudly Canadian, and whenever I traveled, I would, make sure that I would say that I'm Canadian, definitely not American. And so being from Canada and moving to Australia and being on the Australian team, I kind of felt I had this like feeling like I was kind of a traitor. I'd never represented Canada, but like, how could someone who's so proudly Canadian move to Australia and represent the Australian team? And much less, like, whenever I open my mouth, people know that I'm not Aussie. And when I first moved here, like, my teammates said to me, like, don't talk, like, when we're at, and don't talk for media stuff or anything like that, because you don't sound Aussie. And that was really hard for my, like, identity. Not only did I kind of feel like I didn't really belong anyways, but also the fact that they would enforce that on top of that. And that took a lot of time for me to understand that I wasn't someone who had just jumped to a random country and gotten random citizenship. Like, it actually took, it was at the War Memorial and Museum in Canberra, when we had half a day off, and walking around there and realizing that, I'm Canadian, but my grandparents and my parents and my whole lineage is from Australia, and my grandparents fought in the war for Australia, and kind of tying those roots down, it made me realize, like, oh no, I do belong to be here. And that took time, and that was really hard for a little while, and I still struggle with that sometimes, because people make comments here and there. They're like, oh, I'm at international competitions wearing Australia uniform. They're like, oh, you don't sound Aussie. But just standing in the confidence of, like, I know that I am enough. Which took me a while to get there, but I definitely did have a bit of an identity crisis for a while. But by the time that I got into Rio, I knew that I deserved it. So when I went out there and would yell and cheer and chant from like my core, Aussie, 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 oi, 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 there'd be like tears running down my face, because I was so freaking proud to be Australian.
God damn it. You're the best.
Thank you.
I guess we can move on to like recovery now, and since you're talking about stepping into your power and finally feeling that you were enough, how have you gone about that? Apart from obviously tying down to your roots, is there anything else you've used along the way?
In like building my confidence?
Yeah, and just feeling, because you've grown up with that self-limiting belief, how have you gone about, I guess, discarding that or processing that?
Yeah. I think it's taken, it is a process that I think will be through my whole life. I am at a such much better point than I am now, than I was. But it took, like I said, kind of faking it till I make it, and shifting my thought patterns to remind myself that I was enough, even if I didn't believe that. And for me, like, I would have affirmations before I'd go out and swim that I am strong, I'm capable, I'm confident, and repeating that to myself. And that seems really simple, but it's really powerful. And at first, if you have those affirmations, you may not believe them, but just keep working at them and keep stepping into them and keep stepping into that person that you believe deserves and is capable and is worthy and is enough to go after what you want and what you deserve and what you is your birthright, really. And so that really helps me. But also, like, from a more holistic point of view, like, I've done, in the past year, realizing that not everything is surface level, like going through and doing breath work, doing Reiki, really breaking it down and with more holistic healers and working through those aspects within myself that are on an energetic or ancestral level. And working through that has really helped me, along with, my affirmations, my self-belief, and just keep pushing forward with that positive mindset, surrounding myself in the right environment with people that believe in me and people that love me. I'm not sure if any of that makes sense.
It does. It
Okay.
does.
Yeah.
You're not going on too much of a tangent. It's all
Okay, good.
relative.
Yeah. So I think it's been realizing that it's internal, and I need to work on it myself, and I can get external help, whether that be, going to see someone that does Reiki or that does energy work or that does kinesiology or breath work or counseling or, just being brave enough to be vulnerable that you want to improve yourself and you are ready and willing and to be able to do that. I think a lot of people need to understand that working to that level of confidence does take work, and it takes you need to be ready and you need to choose it. You can't choose it for someone else. They need to choose it for themselves, and they need to go after that and believe that they, even if it's a tiny, 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 tiny bit of themselves, they need to believe that they are worthy of a good life and worthy of releasing themselves of their pain and worthy of releasing themselves of everything and worthy of their greatest, most beautiful and passionate life.
Yes. So many fucking yes queens in this episode. Jeez. Just touching on affirmations. For me, affirmations is probably one of the most powerful things in my life, and it's something I start my day with. And I've found that if I step on a stage or go to do an interview and I feel like, oh shit, I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know if you're meant to do this. That's usually because I've skipped over the affirmation and really convincing myself that I am worthy or that I'm good enough or that I'm meant to be doing it. So it's had such a profound impact on my life.
It's so powerful. And the way that I do it as well, like, I know Tony Robbins talks about like changing your physical state, but like, I literally, before I walk on, I stand in like a power pose, like, and my legs wide, my hands on my hips and like chest up. And I just repeat to myself, I am strong, I'm capable, I'm confident. I still do that now. Like, and I've been for a freaking long time because I feel like I'm about to shit my pants every time I walk out there on stage. Like, and it is scary, but just stepping into those affirmations and that belief, even if it isn't 1,000% true in the moment, that you do have that in you. You just need to get to that point. And affirmations are so powerful. And I do that every day now too. And I meditate in the morning and the evening as well. And that really helps me as well.
Cool. How do you do that? What sort of session length, and is there any intention in terms of meditation?
For my meditation, so I just meditate morning and night, and I have been a very structured person because I've been in a sport for so long, so I'm trying to be a bit kinder with myself. But I just, at first, I try to meditate. I'm like, this is not possible. Like, my mind is too like, but just realizing that you can't meditate bad, just at least sitting in silence and just, even if it's just focusing on your breath and focusing on your body sensations. And I don't necessarily do a time limit, but I just sit there and feel. And then I work into my affirmations. And for me now, it's like, I am a strong, I'm capable, I'm a confident, I'm a beautiful woman, I'm inspiring, and I'm powerful. And like putting my hand on my heart and saying that in my head, and then visualizing the life that I believe that I am worthy of. and creating that in my mind, like what it feels like to be where I believe that I'm going to be, what it tastes like to be there, what my environment is like, what my bank account looks like, what everything in my life looks like when I'm going to be living that next level of my dream, but also realizing that amongst all of that, at the end of my visualization, ending with gratitude, because I am so grateful to be where I am today. And I realize that I am already living my dream life by existing in it now. And what I'm envisioning for the future is only a greater expansion of that. But my gratitude does not change, and my happiness does not change no matter what.
Fuck yeah. And you've touched on environment a bit, but what most people don't understand is that your thoughts and what you say are the parts of your environment that you don't ever move away from. They're always going to be with you no matter what, especially your thoughts. So working on your thoughts through meditation, through gratitude, on what you say, through affirmations, that's powerful. And that's something that's never going to leave you as long as you remain consistent.
Yeah. And that you're like, are you familiar with Dr. Bruce Lipton?
Yep.
Yeah. So like literally, your thoughts can change your genes.
Yeah.
That people don't realize that your thoughts are energy, and your energy can change your environment. Your energy can change your future. And even if you have those negative thoughts, because, we all still do, just being more aware of switching those to positive thoughts. Or if you have those negative thoughts, use them, disassociate the negativity from them and change the meaning and use it as fuel. So if I am in a point where I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm not enough, just using that statement as fuel to remind myself I am enough, because we associate meanings with words based on what we have been conditioned with in this world. And if we learn to change that, like I believe changing failure into something positive because it's just a learning lesson along the road, and do the same with some of our thoughts, I think it's really a really powerful way to change our state and change our future. And even if you aren't, mentally in the right environment, being in the right environment physically, like if maybe you don't have supportive friends or family, but go and seek out, a group of like-minded people that is going to help you get there. There is so much access to so much stuff online nowadays with people that are like-minded, that are supportive, that are positive, that literally just want to help other people like yourself and like myself to be able to be where they need to be the best versions of themselves. So I think just taking the initiative to reach out as well.
Yeah, and I have a few people who ask me about, like, Dr. Bruce Lipton and him talking about thoughts changing genes, like epigenetics and that sort of stuff, and they can't quite grasp the concept. It seems too esoteric for a lot of people, but the easiest way I've found to put it is that every bit of your body, every atom vibrates at a certain frequency, which means it's energized, which means it's energy, and therefore words that you say are energy, thoughts that you think are energy, and that energy can influence every atom in your body.
I think, yeah, and I find that it's so powerful because it's brought down to a scientific point of view, even if you don't, it may seem a bit woo-woo to some people, but when you realize it's literally scientifically been proven that can happen, it's a lot more powerful. And even if you don't fully believe it, just allowing yourself on the side of like, maybe what if it is possible? Like what if, like, what are you going to lose by having a few positive thoughts every day? You know what? It's not going to kill you. Like, it's literally not going to kill you. It's literally going to only make your life better. We're not telling people to do something crazy. We're just telling them to like have positive thoughts and affirmations, so you can not believe that it's possible and still try it and just see. Just give it a hot shot. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You feel a little bit better about yourself at the end of the day?
A couple questions before we wrap up, buddy. What are you most grateful for right now?
I love that question. So I try and say what I'm grateful for every moment. But like I said, I think it's so easy for us to be grateful for, our family and the house over our head and our stuff, which of course is amazing. And I'm so grateful for that all my family and friends are healthy and well. But just reminding ourselves, like, I'm so grateful to have a body that works, that I'm able-bodied enough to be able to walk and breathe and speak and hear and listen by myself. I think And I believe I said this before, but like being an Olympian has also allowed me the privilege to be around Paralympians. You know, I have friends that are runners or, pole vaulters or wheelchair basketball players, and they're amazing. And they are so grateful for the body that they have, and they may have one limb less or two limbs less than me. So how dare I not be grateful for this body that I exist in that is perfectly fine, and I think sometimes it's so easy to get wrapped up in the massive things of gratitude that we forget how much of a freaking miracle it is that we're just sitting here right now, breathing on our own while our heart is beating and I can see you and speak to you. Like, that is insane when you really, really, really think about it. So I am so grateful for this body that I'm living in, and the opportunity to be able to speak with you because of the internet. Like, what the hell is the internet? It's crazy. Like, we're connected right now when we're talking in real time based on that. Like when we really break the big things down or sometimes the simple things down, it's just, how can you not be grateful? There's always going to be some level of gratitude that you can find in your life if you choose to change your perspective.
And that is a beautiful contrast to the girl who grew up self-conscious about how she looked.
But a massive contrast, and I'm so grateful to that girl because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't through those glasses that I lived my life through. But at the same time, I'm really proud of the person I am here today, and I don't think that girl would have ever believed what this girl was possible of.
Yes. Last one. If you had the chance to put a message on a billboard where thousands of people would see it, what would that message be?
Oh, that's a really good question.
It can't be unlikely Olympian.
Yeah.
Like Danielle Kettlewell.
That'd be a bit self-centered anyways. Like, I don't think I'm that much of a narcissist. That would be a dick move. If I could put a message on a billboard, well, that's a very loaded question, but what you choose to believe, you can achieve.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit corny, but right. I'm a bit of a cheeseball. Yeah. It's a bit, it needs to be broken down a little bit, but our life is only as great as our imagination allows us to believe it will be.
Yes. Visualize that shit. Affirm that shit.
Yeah, holla.
To wrap up, buddy, I just want to thank you for taking time to do this, for persevering through the Wi-Fi troubles.
Yes, sorry about that.
For most of all, I want to acknowledge you for the fact that you've been through all of this. You've got this sort of platform. You've had these sort of experiences, but you're willing to open up, be vulnerable, and to share them, especially with your book coming out. That's a whole nother level. That means it's never ever leaving.
I know, that's really scary putting all of that out there in the world.
Yeah, but I'm just super grateful that there's someone like you doing something like this. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much. And in return, I want to say I'm so grateful that there's someone like yourself that is also opening up and speaking about, struggles in mental health. And I think when I moved to Australia, I noticed that is a big issue that is among the culture, especially in men. And I believe that it needs to change, and it will change with people like yourselves that are brave enough and vulnerable enough and have the courage to go after it and share your story, because people's stories are powerful and your story is powerful, and the desire that you have inside of you to make a change in people's lives is powerful, and you are going to, and you already have shifted that. And so thank you so much for living in your passion and doing what you love, because it matters so much, and it is so worthy of this world to recognize you.
Thank you, buddy. Can't wait to see you crushing those stages.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.